Happy Friday, February 6th, right? Is that what it is? Let's see, what's our date today? Actually, I think it's later than that. Let me look at the calendar. Losing track. Yeah, it is Friday the 6th. Wow. Okay. So I was thinking it was actually Friday the 8th, but you lose track of time when you're in real estate. Welcome, everybody. Glenn Stein here, Realty Executives. We're going to talk about what is active, but there's some big changes in the Villages market right now. So if you're thinking about selling your home, I'm going to give you a couple of pointers, a couple of things that you really need to understand. And it's not going to be the basic stuff. It's going to be things that you need to understand when you're selling your home for sure. But let's look at this. Kind of got my curiosity. It was like, lately we've been going on caravan. I think we're the only in-person caravan company in the Villages where we've got a bus and we take our agents. We make our we make our agents go look at homes, and that way they're familiar with what's going on in the market. And I've been noticing that we have had more and more properties that are in this Eastport area, right? The very southern and very eastern area of the Villages. And you're seeing here active on MLS, you're seeing more and more properties that are becoming available, even though they're just a couple of years old, 1 or 2 years old. More properties are becoming available. Chitty Chatty, Fenny area over here near the Coleman area, and then obviously moving southeast towards Okahumpka, both south and north of the Turnpike. We are seeing a lot more properties available in these areas, and then looking at between 44 and 466A. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can get a bit there, right there. Pine Hills area, barely in Lake County here. This is Sumter County on this side. And then obviously between the sixes, very popular area because of Sumter Landing. By the way, then we backtrack, getting good reports on people that are liking Eastport as well, like the new square. And then, north of 466, just lots of properties, lots on the market right now. And I think, pay attention to the inventory. When you're selling your home, if you own a home between County Road 42 and 466, north of 466, this area, obviously there's a lot of inventory and a lot of competition. So you have to be aware of that. So that's a, potential negative, but there is a positive. And one of the positives is that if you do live in this area, right, like the further north you live, the further away you are from the new construction, right? New construction mostly being down in this area here, south of the Turnpike and moving east, Okahumpka towards Eastport and Middleton in that area. The further away you get from the new construction, the less competition with new construction there is. So I think that's definitely something to really consider when you're thinking about selling your home. So number one, inventory, right? You do have to be mindful of the inventory that's out there. The competition, I think that's super important. That's super important to really be mindful of, all the properties that are available at the moment. Okay, so pay attention to that. I think that's something that is extremely important. Let's also look at between, historic section, right? There is quite a bit of competition there. We're going to look at solds in a minute. 466 to 466A. There's a lot here, but it's pretty much the same amount. Let's see, we're 134. Let's take a look. Let's zoom in. Let's see. We are looking at, let me get an idea. Yeah, okay. So there's more properties north of 466 available than there are south between the sixes, and it's a little bit more of a desirable area. They sell a little bit quicker and for a little bit more money south of 466. One of the areas that has been underrated, in my opinion, has been this area closer to Brownwood, 466A to 44. and pay attention to how much inventory there is, not just the entire villages, because now the entire villages, you're talking about many neighborhoods now, and not just villages, but think about this area here north of 466 is vastly different compared to around the turnpike, right? Like I think this area, in my mind, when we're looking at property along the turnpike from Fenny all the way down to Eastport, that's kind of like one area. Anything north of 44 to 466A is another area. Another area is 466A to 466. And then another area is going to be 466 to 42. And then you got the historic section on the east side of 441. So, each area, you have to really look at what's your competition in each area. And I would really, really watch out for that. Okay. Especially when you're putting your home on the market. It's not just the village that you're in, right? Like, and of course, looking at like kind properties. When we talk about comps, we're talking about like kind properties, similar models, similar square footage, age, which is related to location, especially in the villages. That matters. That's a big deal, right? So let's actually no. Let's look at. We're going to look at sold. And there is something I want to show you. We're going to look at some stats here that I think should impact your decision when you're thinking about selling your home. Let's take a look at this. Okay, we're going to look at the last 10 years. But we're going to look at, sales. Let's look at sales in the month. Look at this big spike. That's 2021 right there. That's almost every market, by the way. And then this big dip, right? 2023, late 2022. Right, looking at sales, 116 in the month of January in MLS side for the villages. That is not the best, but it's not the worst. For a January is typically one of the lightest months as far as closings, because that's December showings. February is probably going to be very similar to what we saw last year in the last couple of years, is my feeling. And March should be pretty brisk as well. We're seeing a lot of pendings, so we're seeing activity right now. But that gives you an idea, 116. Okay. But inventory, we've seen an increase in inventory, and which actually a little bit of a surprise to me. I think in a nutshell, what we're looking at, a couple of things that we need to consider if you're selling. Number one is the amount of inventory that's out there. That's number one, right? Increase in inventory. We've seen a 10% increase in inventory. Where almost all of 2025, we saw a decrease in inventory. So we're seeing a lot more homes come on the market. Obviously, it's during season. Right now, our caravan is pretty much booked, meaning we're overbooked actually for caravan, in-person caravan. So what we are doing is we're exposing your properties during our Monday conference call. So that gives you additional exposure. That's our goal, right? That's how we're alleviating the problem. That's one thing. The second thing is that sales are pretty good. Pretty good. They're not great. Could be better. Could be a lot worse. We've seen worse and we've seen better. So it's kind of like in the middle right now. So, if you're thinking, is it a good time to sell? I think it's an okay time to sell. It's hard to predict, if you waited, would it be better? Right? We typically, one thing, let me go back to something that I think is important to show you. Like, as some people think that, okay, well, I don't want to sell it in the summer. I don't want to sell my home in the summer. But if we start grouping by month, let's just take last year. And if you look at closings, this is going to be important. Closings last year, most amount of closings last year happened in the month of June. You might be surprised by that. Look at the numbers. 122, 137, 172, big March, big April, big May, big June, light July, good August, September, pretty solid, light November, December, pretty solid. What typically happens is, if you look at it, January is usually light. February is better, except for 2023. March, really strong mostly. 2023 was a weak year, obviously. April, really solid. May, solid. June, usually it's okay, but it's starting to decrease because of the summer. Last year, a little bit of a different story. July, lighter. August, okay. September, okay. Right? So you start getting, there's mostly a theme. And if we were to look at let's look at the chart, because what we can look at is, look at the trough. If you look at the troughs, right? Here's a trough, June of 2020. That's for obvious reasons. Let's see what this month here. That's in February. February is almost always like February's closings, January, February closings. Like it's usually the trough of the market, right? These bottom points here, like this is probably, what is this? This is January, right? January of 2023. Let's go here. January of 2024. This is October. Another trough. 2025 February, right? Like, so that's what we typically see. Now let's look at the peaks. Start here. April, another peak here. April, July, a little bit of a surprise. May, right? Some of the peaks, and this is not precise, but April, another peak here. April, let's go all the way up here. What was this? May, and then this is 2021, so it might be July here. Yeah, July. Let's look at peak here. Things drop, but there was a peak here for this month. April closings. June, April. There's a little bit of theme. July, right? So you kind of get a rhythm that April is, if we're looking at, if we're voting like the bottom, the troughs, we're pretty much in January, February, and then the peaks were like April closings, which means right now, probably the next 30 days, you're looking at the next 30 days, next 30 days showings, because it's, first week of February up until like maybe middle of March is the peak time for putting things under contract. Doesn't mean we can't sell your home in the summer, because I just showed you, like we had some June and July peaks. Hopefully that helps. If you have questions, call me. That's my number. Broker here at Realty Executives, 352-572-3796.